everybody, welcome back to Unimonks. My name is Padmanjali Chauhan and today we're going to be talking about the syllabus for history domain for CUET 2024. Okay, now a couple of things to keep in mind before we start talking about the syllabus. The syllabus comes from the NCERT book, alright? And number two, that the NCERT book for the board examinations has removed 3 units, alright. I will tell you what those units are as we go talking about them, but 3 units have been removed for the CBSE boards, alright. But these 3 units will be there for the CUET paper, alright. So whether you study them for the boards or not, you have to study them for the CUET paper, okay. Now, do I have to tell you anything else? Not really. Okay, let's start with the first unit, okay? The first unit is Story of the First Cities, Harappan Archaeology, alright? Now, what are we going to learn in the, what do you have to learn in this chapter? What do you have to understand in this chapter? Number one, you have to get a broad overview of the early urban centers, alright? Urban centers of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, okay? Then you have to talk or understand the story of discovery of the Harappan civilization, okay? Here you have to understand what Alexander Cunningham's work was, what John Marshall's contributions were, what Mortimer Wheeler did, alright? Apart from this, an excerpt can come from the archaeological report on a major site. It hasn't come yet in any of the previous papers, but you cannot, but that does not mean that it won't come in a future paper, alright? So always be prepared, okay? Lastly, you're going to talk about how the information that the archaeologists discovered at the Harappan sites was utilized by them, alright? How they found out more things about the Harappan civilization from the little information that they gathered from those sites, okay? Unit number 2 is political and economic history, how inscriptions tell a story, alright? So the broad overview you have to understand and learn from this chapter is of the political and economic history from the Mauryan period to the Gupta period, alright? Very, very important. Number 2, you're going to talk about the story of the discovery of inscriptions and the decipherment of the scripts, alright? So Brahmi, Kharoshti, their decipherment, alright? And you're going to understand the shifts in the understanding of political and economic history through these inscriptions. After the scripts were deciphered and the inscriptions were understood, you're going to, or we are going to understand how the political and economic history, or what the political and economic history was of the period, alright? An excerpt can come from the Ashokan inscriptions and the Gupta period land grants, alright? So the land grants are from Prabhavati Gupta and the Ashokan, and the Ashokan inscriptions are mentioned in the sources, alright? Now, discussions, oh yes, sources given in the textbook, very, very important, alright? They're important for your board examination and they're important for the CUET paper as well, okay? They're very important. The excerpts that come in your CUET paper are from those sources. So read each and every one of the sources given in the chapter, alright? No matter how many 10 sources given in a chapter, 12 sources given in a chapter, 2 sources in a chapter, read all of them, alright? Okay, now the discussion on this chapter is going to be on the interpretation of inscriptions by historians, okay? We're going to talk about how after the inscriptions were deciphered, after the language was deciphered, how these inscriptions were interpreted, how they found the political and economic history of the era, okay? Now, unit number 3 is social histories using the Mahabharat, okay? So a broad understanding of the issues in social history, including caste, class, kinship and gender, okay? So how the society was divided into 4 varnas, okay? How society was further divided into those multiple classes coming out of those varnas, okay? The kinship, how familial relationships were at the time, okay? And the gender disparity of the time. Next, we're going to talk about the story of the discovery, transmission and publication of the Mahabharat, alright? the multiple versions, okay, the multiple languages that the Mahabharata was found in across the subcontinent, how those were transmitted, okay, how those were translated, then compiled and published together. That is what you're going to learn in this chapter as well. And an excerpt can come from the Mahabharata illustrating how it has been used by historians, okay, what historians have understood from the Mahabharata, okay. Now, unit number 4, a history of Buddhism, Sanchi Stupa, okay. A broad overview of 2 things you need to understand. One is a brief review of religious histories of the Vedic religion, Jainism, Vaishnavism and Shaivism, alright. And secondly, you have to focus on Buddhism, okay. So, you broadly understand what the Vedic religion were, what Jainism, Shaivism and Vaishnavism was, then your main focus should be on Buddhism, okay. The story of the discovery of the Sanchi Stupa also needs to be learned. It's a beautiful story, it's a very nice, very interesting story. We will talk about it, okay. So, this needs to be kept in mind. Apart from this, excerpt can come from the reproduction of sculptures from the Sanchi, alright. Whatever sculptures were found, okay, what sources. So, this will be written about in the source boxes, okay. So, what historians thought about the sculptures, okay, in what conditions those sculptures were found, all of that, okay. A discussion is going to be in the ways in which sculptures have been interpreted by historians, okay, and other sources used for reconstructing the history of Buddhism, okay. Apart from the sculptures that were found, apart from the Sanchi Stupa, we will also discuss about the Buddhist texts that were written at the time, alright, and how it has helped historians interpret and reconstruct the history of Buddhism, alright. Unit number 5, medieval society through travelers' accounts, okay. A broad overview of this unit is going to be the outline of social and cultural life as they appear in travelers' accounts. Now, a major, if you have already studied the 2nd chapter and the 1st chapter, you've seen my videos, okay, you've learned from them, a major problem with accounts and sources that we found are that, number 1, that they are from the ruler's point of view, from the elite's point of view, okay. But these travelers, they give us a very mundane point of view, okay, how the daily existence took place. So, that is why this unit is very important, okay. Apart from this, stories of their writing, okay, a discussion of where they traveled, the travelers, okay. The travelers are Al-Biruni, Ibn Battuta and Francois Bernier, alright. A discussion of where they traveled, why they traveled and what they wrote and for whom they wrote, okay. So, whatever places they traveled to, why did they travel to these particular places, what they wrote about all of it and for whom did they write all of this, alright. The travelers that you are going to focus on are Al-Biruni, Ibn Battuta and Francois Bernier, alright. The discussion of this unit is going to be on what these travel accounts can tell us and how they have been interpreted by historians, alright. As I told you earlier, these travelers accounts, they give us a gist, they tell us about what the daily existence of the regular people was, okay, what their life was like, alright. They tell us about the grandiose sort of kingship of the rulers, okay, all of that. Then, unit number 6 is on religious histories, the Bhakti Sufi traditions, okay. A broad overview of 2 things are going to be understood in this unit. Number 1, the outline of religious developments during this period, okay. Now, as you know, Bhakti movement came out of the Hindu religion and the Sufi movement came out of the Islamic religion, right. So, we are going to talk about what developments took place that compelled the Bhakti Sufi tradition to come up, alright. Number 2, the ideas and practices of the Bhakti Sufi saints, okay, what their ideas were, why they started this movement, okay, what their practices were, all of this will be understood. Then the story of transmission, how Bhakti Sufi compositions have been preserved through the centuries, alright. Next, an excerpt can come from the extracts from selected Bhakti Sufi works. Okay, again, sources, very important, focus on them, your excerpts will come from there. Okay, lastly, a discussion on the ways in which these extracts have been interpreted by historians. All right. Whatever sources were found, whatever the Bhakti Sufi saints talked about, whatever they wrote, okay, how it has been interpreted by historians, how historians have talked about, how historians have interpreted what the social and political life was like at the time. All right. That's it. That is what we're going to discuss in this unit. Now, unit number 7, new architecture, Hampi. Hampi is a part of the Vijayanagar Empire. Okay. So, number 1, broad overview of 2 things, outline of new buildings during the Vijayanagar period. Okay. So, the temples, forts, irrigation facilities that were started. When you read this chapter, okay, when you learn about this chapter, I am telling you, it is the most mesmerizing thing ever. The Vijayanagar Empire, I swear, is the most beautiful thing that has ever existed in Indian history. All right, the advancement in technology is mind blowing. All right, number 2, number 2, what we're going to understand is the relationship between architecture and the political system of the time of the empire. All right. Second, the story of discovery of accounts of how Hampi was found. All right. This will be, the accounts are given in general in your chapter as well, and they talked about in depth in the sources. Okay, so concentrate on both the things. And an excerpt can come for the visuals of buildings at Hampi. Okay, how beautiful the buildings were. Okay, how intricately they were carved. All of that. Okay, it can be a part of the excerpt. Okay. Now, a discussion will happen in the ways in which historians have analyzed and interpreted these structures. Okay, historians from these structures found out how, number 1, how rich the Vijayanagar Empire was. Okay, number 2, how peaceful the empire was. Right. So, because in order to be able to build these temples, right, to be able to put in all your money, your empire, your kingdom's money into building temples and forts and irrigation facilities, you need to have some sort of peaceful environment, right? You clearly were not going to war with people all the time, right? So, this is what a broad understanding of what has been interpreted from these buildings. Okay, we'll talk about it more in depth in further videos. Okay. Now, unit number 8, Agrarian Relations, the Aini Akbari. Okay, a broad overview of, number 1, the structure of agrarian relations in the 16th and 17th centuries. Okay, and number 2, the patterns of change over the period. Okay. The Aini Akbari is the main source of understanding of this chapter. All right, everything that is written in this chapter, everything that is being understood from this chapter comes from the source Aini Akbari. Okay, it talks about the agrarian society of the time. Okay, what the plights of the people were, what were other things that they did apart from agriculture, all of that will be understood in this chapter. Okay, the story of discovery, account of the compilation and translation of the Aini Akbari. Okay, number 3, an excerpt can come from the Aini Akbari, and the discussion will happen in ways in which historians have used this text to reconstruct history, obviously. Okay, all of this will take place as I start teaching you these chapters. Okay. Unit number 9, the Mughal Court, reconstructing histories through chronicles. Now, this is the first unit that the NCERT has cancelled for the CBSE boards. Okay, this will not come in the CBSE boards, but it will come in the CUET paper. All right, so please do not skip this chapter. Please study it. All right. Now, in this unit, we're going to understand, okay, so first of all, what are these chronicles, okay, that we're talking about? The chronicles are of the Mughal emperors, okay, Babarnama, Akbarnama, Alamgirnama, all of those, okay, whatever is written, all of that, using those sources, we will understand what was going on from in this chapter, okay. Now, the number 1, so broad overview about 2 things. Number 1, an outline of the political history circa 15th to 17th centuries. Okay, that will be understood through these sources. Number 2, a discussion of the Mughal court and its politics. Okay, these books, because they were because the rulers themselves told their poets and their court historians and their writers to write these books about themselves. They also talk about everything that happened in the Mughal court, the politics that was going on at that point in life. Okay, so all of this will be discussed. Okay. Number 2, the story of discovery, account of the production of court chronicles and their subsequent translations and transmissions. Okay, so how these court chronicles were produced. Okay, what led to the production of these court chronicles. Okay, then how these chronicles were eventually translated. Okay, so that other people could understand them as well. Okay, now apart from this, the excerpt will come from the Akbarnama and the Padshahnama. All right, and lastly, the discussion will take place on ways in which historians have used the text to reconstruct political histories. Obviously, that is what you're going to discover. You're going to discuss, right? How historians, by reading these texts, have discussed or have reconstructed the history or the political, the social, the economic history of the time. All right. Now, the next unit is colonialism and rural society, evidence from official reports. Okay, now this, we leave the Akbars and the Baburs, we leave the Mughal Empire and we move on to the British Empire. Okay, this chapter starts after the revolt of 1857. Okay, sorry, no, not the revolt of 1857. 1757, okay, when the British started becoming more and more powerful, okay, when they started establishing their power. Okay, now a broad overview of 2 things. Number 1, life of the zamindars, peasants and artisans in the late 18th century, right, 1757, 18th century. Number 2, East India Company and the revenue settlements and the surveys that took place. Okay, so now after the Indians lost in the Battle of 1757, what the EIC did, okay, to take over the agrarian society, okay, the revenue settlements that took place. So the revenue settlements we're going to be talking about are the Mahalwadi settlements, okay, Mahalwadi, and the Rayatwadi settlements. All right. Apart from this, the third thing you need to understand in this chapter are the changes over the 19th century. Okay, so now late 18th century, also going into the 19th century. All right. Now, story of official records. Okay, so the things you need to concentrate on are the official records that came out at this time. Okay, an account of why official investigations into rural societies were undertaken and the type of records and reports that were produced. All right, the excerpts will come from Firminger's 5th report. It will also, excerpts can also come from the accounts of Francis Buchanan Hamilton and the Deccan riots. Now, these two have already come, all right. The accounts of Francis Buchanan Hamilton has already come in a previous year's question paper, and the Deccan riots report has also come in a previous year's question paper. So you know that this chapter is very, very important. Okay, the discussion is going to take place on what the official records tell and do not tell, and how they have been used by historians. All right. Okay. Now, unit number 11, representations of 1857. 2 things that you're going to understand broadly in this chapter are, number 1, the events of 1857 and 58. Now, in this, the events are starting from before the revolt of 1857. Okay, what led to the revolt of 1857, then what happened after the revolt of 1857. All right. Number 2, the thing you're going to understand is how these events were recorded and narrated. Okay, from the Indians' point of view and from the British point of view. All right. Now, the focus is going to be on Lucknow. Okay, at that time it was called Awadh. Okay, the focus is going to be on Lucknow, and excerpts will come from the pictures of 1857 and extracts from contemporary accounts. Okay, this will all be in your chapter. As we go into the chapter, I will explain to you how excerpts can come from some particular picture. All right. Now, discussion on this in this chapter will take place on how the pictures of 1857 shaped British opinion of what had happened. All right. What the Indians thought of the British after the War of 1857, what the Indians thought of the British after the what the Indians thought of the British after the revolt of 1857 and what the British thought of the Indians after the revolt of 1857. All of this is going to be discussed in this unit. All right. Unit number 12, your second unit that has been cancelled from the NCERT syllabus for the CBSE boards. Okay, it has been cancelled, but this will also be a part of your CUET syllabus. Okay, do not, if you are planning on giving the CUET paper, do not skip this chapter. All right. I mean, I'm assuming you're planning on giving the CUET paper if you're watching this video. Sorry. Now, unit number 12 is colonialism and the Indian towns, town plans and municipal records. Okay, so a broad overview of the growth of Mumbai and Chennai, which was Mumbai and Chennai were at that time presidencies of the British Empire. Okay, so it was called the Mumbai was called the Bombay Presidency, and Chennai was called the Madras Presidency. All right, Presidency. So, understanding the growth of these two presidencies, the hill stations and the cantonments that came up in the 18th and 19th century. All right, very, very important, very interesting actually. They're very, very interesting. Apart from this, apart from the Bombay and Madras Presidency, focus will also be on the Bengal Presidency or on Kolkata most importantly. Okay, now excerpts can come from photographs and paintings, plans of cities and extracts from town planning reports. The focus will be on the Kolkata town planning. All right, Kolkata town planning is very important. It is very interesting. When I start the chapter, when I tell you about it in the chapter, you will understand why it is so interesting. All right, now the discussion that will take place in this chapter will be on how the above sources can be used to reconstruct the history of the towns, of the town planning at the time, why the British built those towns like that. All right, and what these sources do not reveal. Right, they'll reveal something, they'll tell us mostly about what was happening, why they did what they did, but we will also delve into what we do not know, what these sources do not tell us. Okay, now unit number 13. All right, unit number 13 is on Mahatma Gandhi through contemporary eyes. All right, a broad overview of this of this unit is going to be on two things. Number one, the nationalist movement 1918 to 1948. 1918 is when Mahatma Gandhi came back to India from South Africa. Okay, number two is going to be on the nature of the Gandhian politics and leadership. Okay, how his ideas on non-violence, okay, and his role as a leader, okay, led us to freedom. All right, the focus is going to be on Mahatma Gandhi in 1931. Now you're going to tell me why 1931. Comment down below. Tell me why 1931. Why is it so important? Why do we have to focus on that? Number 3, excerpts are going to come from the reports from English and Indian language newspapers and other contemporary writings. All right, so English and Indian language newspapers were mostly from Indians. All right, we're also going to be talking about Gandhi's newspaper. Okay, all of that is going to be discussed further. Now, the discussion of this chapter is going to take place on how newspapers can be a very important source of history. You know this, I know this, but how are they so important? Why are they so important? Right? We'll discuss this, don't worry. Now, unit number 14, this chapter, partition through oral sources, removed from the NCERT syllabus for the boards, okay, but it will come in the CUET paper. Okay, very, very important chapter. partition through oral sources. Okay, the broad overview you're going to take in this chapter is going to be of, number one, the history of the 1940s, what led to the partition, all right, why the partition happened, why did the Hindus and the Muslims want two different states, two separate states, all right, all of that. Number two, we're going to be talking about the nationalism, the communalism, and the partition of the time. Okay, why people felt that more nationalistic towards Pakistan than towards India, all right, what led to the communal riots at the time, okay, and the eventual partition, all right. The focus is going to be on two places, Punjab and Bengal. We know these two were the most hard hit places. Bengal right beside Bangladesh at that time, East Pakistan, all right, and Punjab right beside West Pakistan, all right. So you know these two places were the most hard hit, okay, that is why we're going to focus on these two places. Number three, the excerpts will be from oral testimonies of those who experienced the partition. This will be in the source boxes. They're very sad stories, all right. They're a little gruesome, but nonetheless give us tell us about a very important life, a very important time in the history of India. Okay, the last thing we're going to discuss in this chapter is the ways in which these have been analyzed to reconstruct the history of the event of partition. Okay, how these oral testimonies have been analyzed to reconstruct the partition, the gruesome, the very heartbreaking partition that happened. All right. Now, unit number 15, the making of the constitution. All right, very important, very interesting actually, because you're going to be talking about the debates that took place in the Constituent Assembly. The debates were various things, whether Hindi should become our national language, all right, etc., etc. So a broad overview is going to be of two things. Number one, the independence and the new nation state, all right. How after the partition, independence gained, all right, India is now an independent state. What happened after that, right? You have a country now, but how are you going to run it, right? How is your constitution, what law of land is going to come in? That is what you're going to talk about, what you're going to focus on. And number two, we're going to focus on is on the making of the constitution. Very interesting, genuinely one of the most fun chapters in this book, all right. Number two, we're going to focus on the Constitutional Assembly debates. As I said earlier, the multiple debates that happened on various things, on reservation, on language, everything we're going to discuss, okay. The excerpts will come from the debates, all right. These will be in your sources, read them. I have reiterated this I think 15 times by this point. And lastly, the thing we're going to discuss in this chapter is what such debates reveal and how they can be analyzed, all right. What these debates reveal about the society at that time and the society and how it can be related to contemporary times, all right, and how these debates can be analyzed, all right. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about in this video is the unit-wise weightage, okay. Unit-wise, how these, if you, now you can see the units have been clubbed together, all right, and they've been clubbed together and given weightage. Now, if you want a specific unit-wise weightage, tell me in the comments down below, I will give you, all right, I will give it to you. If you want like the marks distribution or whatever, tell me in the comments down below, I will give it to you in another video, all right. Now, unit number 1 to 4 in the previous year's papers came for 26%, had a weightage of 26% of the paper, okay. Units 5 to 9 had a weightage of 29% of the paper, okay. Units 10 to 3 had a weightage of 30%, and excuse me, and units 14 to 15 had a weightage of 15%, all right. Now, very important, all of the chapters are important, all right. The weightage is divided not equally, all right. If you want, when I give you this chapter the unit specific weightage, you'll realize that they're not divided equally, and that is when you'll get to know what chapters are more important than some of the other chapters, all right. If you want that, tell me, tell me in the comments, okay, and I will give it to you. I promise I'll give it to you, all right. But that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. All right. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I will come out with more history related content in the future. So to keep yourself updated with that, subscribe to Monks. Thank you for watching. Bye.